How are you doing? Woo! Yeah, me too. Maybe I did a little bit too much research last night, but I had to, get the feel of the crowd, before doing DJ set to see what they like. Yeah, my name is Jakob Gottlieb Svendsen, and I'm actually not a DJ. I mostly play my own music. I never had the actual patience to learn to mix and to sit and wait for a track to be done before you can mix the next track and so on. So I make my own music and I play trance music in my spare time. And when it's not my spare time, when I have to work, I work in a company called CT Global. I've been there for almost 12 years, so that's a long time. And now I'm the global lead developer, so it means I have a responsibility for everything that gets developed, but also a consultant globally. Yeah, that's me. So what I'm going to talk about today is, actually I was going to call it how to do a DJ set in PowerShell, but Alexander, he thought that was such a boring title, so we changed the name to last night, a PowerShell DJ saved my life. Somebody should have saved my life last night, though. So, learn how well, that's a typo. I always have a typo, and I always change my slides on the fly, I'm agile. Learn how to mix music using PowerShell. Really useful. This is actually the first time I really had to ask my boss, is it okay that I go and spend 1 week in Germany and talk about a Lego robot and a DJ set? Because that has nothing to do with whatever I do as work. But he said, yeah, it shows that you think out of the box, and it shows that you know PowerShell and so on. So to make a DJ set, to make this work, you need to understand the technology behind musical instruments. And then, of course, you learn to be cool, right? So the agenda, I'm going to talk about the basic setup. I'm going to talk about communication between PowerShell and DJ thing. And then building a virtual DJ. Well, putting it all together in the end, and then just show some stuff. And maybe questions. But, so I realized I've actually had this idea for 1.5 years or so. And last year I talked to Jeffrey and I said, hey, I have this idea about making a DJ set. I want to make the commands easy with aliases so you can write it live on stage. And he said, why do you want to do it live on stage? Why don't you just start the script and then sit down and have the script do the session? And I was like, that's a good idea. So I actually discarded that was not because of that, but because I didn't have time. I have a daughter now that's 1.5 years old, so didn't have time to do it, so I kind of discarded it a little bit. But then the rumor spread like, oh, he wants to do a DJ set. And then I someday promised it to do it. So then I had to do it. But then I realized this is going on YouTube, and music is copyrighted. So my original plans to play all weird, I have another typo there, sorry. My original plan to play mixed different kind of music, was not a good idea because it's going to YouTube. So what I did was to ask my friends in a label called Polka Records in Denmark. And I asked them, can I play your music live here? Can I play it publicly? Can I play it on YouTube? And they said, yes, please do. And we'll promote the video too. And then I said, okay, let's see if it becomes a good video. Then you can promote it, and hopefully it will be. So it's actually one of my favorite labels. It's the one label that got me into a genre called psychedelic trance music. Anybody here listens to psychedelic trance music? A few people, yeah. And they have names such as Vini Vici, which is one of the biggest EDM acts right now. Beat Bizarre, one of my favorites. Perfect Stranger, Captain Hook, Ace Ventura. They have many things. They have actually 25-year anniversary, so they have been there for a long time. So all the music I have here is from Polka Records. And in the end, I have a slide where there's links to buying and the list of tracks that I will play. Okay, so yeah, well, it's already on the slide. Let's see here. So I was like, yeah, do a DJ set. And I was like, how do I do it? So I tried to figure out, okay, how can I do this? There's a a program called TrackShow, this program here, which is for mixing music. It's almost the de facto standard today. If you mix music using a laptop and you use this program. So I thought, that's it. I'm going to use that program. So I looked at this application, and I was like, okay, how am I going to control the application then? And I hoped there was an API, but there is no API. Surprise! And there's no API on the way, and they don't plan on making an API because whoever wants to automate a DJ set, somebody might, but how do I do it then? How can I make communication between my musical instrument, you could call it, the application for a DJ set, and PowerShell? No API. What do I do? It supports MIDI controllers. MIDI controllers is things like these. So this works in a protocol from, I think it's 1983, actually, it's super old, almost as old as me. It supports MIDI controllers. So can I somehow make a virtual MIDI controller using PowerShell and have the communication between the application and my PowerShell using MIDI communication? So what do I do? This is MIDI, Musical Instrument Digital Interface. So there's something called loop MIDI. So MIDI is the communication between the controller and the program, or between a synthesizer and another synthesizer, or all these things in music. Then we have loop MIDI, which is this little utility. I can start here. Well, it was already running. See it again here, sorry. Right here. And what it does is to make a virtual MIDI cable inside my computer. So now I have 2 outputs and 2 inputs. And from PowerShell, I can maybe utilize the outputs and inputs and send them into TrackShow and control it. So I thought, yes, that's the way to go. So we have these virtual ports. And it's a free utility made by a German, Tobias Eriksen. I don't know how to say it in German. And then, oh, it's good. I almost sounded Norwegian or something there. Okay, so I looked into making a MIDI communication using PowerShell or .NET. So the first thing I did was to go to Google, of course, and search. And I found there is actually already a module for doing the basic MIDI communication between PowerShell and MIDI instruments. So this can enable us to do a communication between PowerShell and TrackShow. And here you see the link. Of course, you can have the slides afterwards. And you'll see later that I did a little extension to it to make it do what I wanted. So here's my version of it. And I'm going to do a PR to the guy who made it, but he hasn't updated his module for 6 years, so I don't expect a reply from him. But so far, it's just on my page. So MIDI communication. Thing is, MIDI communication has a few different things. One is it can send notes. You play a keyboard, it can send whatever note you play, and also has, you can send how long the note is. So you send like a note on, and then you send a note off when you turn it off again. So for buttons on this thing, like play, stop, and so on, you can use MIDI Notes. Because inside TrackShow, so here, I can set up something here that shows, that says, okay, if I want to, let's see, where's the start? There. If I send, I know it's pretty small, if I send a note called C-1 to this program, then it's gonna start or pause this thing. So that's the way to control, buttons. Next up, there's something called MIDI CC, which is what you do when you turn, a knob, like a filter or equalizer or something like that. And it goes from 0 to 127. And it's used for effects or the mixer. So to control stuff like the fader here, or this one here, I use MIDI CC. That is what we always use. But we can then send that from PowerShell. So that's great. Now we can control this thing. But how do we control it so that it's in sync? We're going to look at something called MIDI Clock. I'm going to get back to that in a second. So controlling the buttons, I use the notes. So you map specific notes to specific buttons, as I just showed you. So let's try that. And we have our DJ tractor. And as I said, I have set up all these different remote controls depending on what notes I send. You see there's different notes here. So I can do different actions. So if we look into PowerShell here, zoom in a little bit. And it's going to be a little difficult to show all the code when the music's playing, but you see, I wish I had two screens. But this is how it works. There is a module, as I said, Pete Brown has this module. It's not on the gallery. I think it wasn't updated while the gallery existed. So he hasn't published it there. So I can import that module. Oh, here you go. There we go. And then I can, just to show you, I can get MIDI output device information, and it shows which ports I have on my machine. So if I were to close this MIDI loop thing and try again, well, it could take a little while before it actually discovers that it's gone, or maybe it's still running down here. Well, that was the thing. Here we go. You see, I don't have any. I just have the built-in Windows for my sound card has also a MIDI port. So if I start loop MIDI, I get new ports. And they have these super friendly names, as you can see. Super friendly names. So to actually use a port, there is a command in the module called get MIDI output or get MIDI input port. And you describe what ID you want to get. And it's clear to everybody that this is output number 1, right? Really easy to understand. Anyway, that's the nature of the core of Windows. So I can get the port, and now I have the port in here. Here you go. It's not very exciting because it doesn't show anything. But now I can use that port against the using this command called send MIDI note on message. Node number 0, which is C-1, as I showed before. Channel 0, it's because MIDI has 16 channels. So if you have one MIDI port in your sound card, you can connect up to 16 devices to that port. And you could even do that in 1983, so it's pretty future technology back then. It's almost like USB where you can connect even more devices. The only problem with MIDI is that every time you want to connect a device, you connect the device, and then you connect the other device to that device, and then the next device to that device. And every time there's a device, there's a little delay. So if you have 16 devices, nothing's going to play in sync. It's going to be all wrong. But yeah, this is what we can do. And then this means that if I send this message here, nothing happens, which was not intentionally. But yeah. This is how it works. You probably just have the wrong. If we look here, maybe we can take MIDI node number 1. Yeah, but it's probably just because it's not loaded. But we can send that into it and control it. So now we have the control for the buttons. Now, so the basic thing to make the DJ set is we need to make the different controllers. So we need to control the effects, as I said. So we use MIDI CC. There's 128 controllers per MIDI channel, and they have values from 0 to 127. Well, that's a bit double there. No. Used for effects and other stuff. So, demo, again, effects are cool. Let's look at that instead. Same thing, we get the MIDI port. We already have the port here, so it should be fine. And then we look at the DJ program here, but now I send to the MIDI port, but I sent channel 0, which is first channel, and then controller 0, value 64. If we look in here, volume, you see that it has MIDI CC channel 1, which is called 0 in PowerShell, because, cool developers, they don't count from 1 to 100, they can count from 0 to 99. So that's the way computers work, you probably all know that. But this means that we can actually make this control the thing here, if it was working, and I think there's Let me just stop and start everything. It's typical. I've tried it, a million times, and then you on stage. And actually, this was the room last year, wasn't it? That I did the Lego session in. So it must be the curse of the room. Nothing works. Let's try it again. Okay. Nope. All right. Okay, I hope it works when you get later into the session. Let's just see here. Let me just try this. Could be that I have something else running here. No, see. Okay, communication works. So, in the first demos here, just to explain, the basics, I'm going to show that I use that in the actual code later. Okay. Let's stop this. Okay, let's just continue here because it's gonna work when we have it in a bigger context later. So I thought, okay, what do a DJ do? The DJ stands and dances and gets drunk or whatever he do, and then he also actually presses the buttons at the right time. So I need PowerShell to be able to trigger my whatever I need to do at certain times in the music. So therefore, we can actually go and What? But I just tested the sound output before.
Yeah, but apparently it sounds like it comes via the HDMI now.
Oh yeah, of course it's Windows sound outputs. Yeah, you're right. There we go. So MIDI clock is something MIDI has to have everything to get in sync and for the synthesizers to know the tempo. And it works by sending 24 PPQN. Everybody knows what PPQNs are, right? It's pulses per quarter note. Okay, what's that then? Yeah, there we go. You see? This is the most beautiful beat. No, this is a standard beat. It looks like this. We have a kick, hi-hat, all this stuff. It plays, right? We stop it here. What you'll see here is that for every time we have this is one, bar of a beat, and for every quarter of that, we have this piece here. And for every one of those, we have 24 clocks. I tried to visualize that by making the clock things here. So we can actually make PowerShell react whenever there's a clock message. So using what's called object events, we can actually go in and register that every time there's a clock event, PowerShell knows about it, and this way we can calculate how fast the music is, beats per minute. We can schedule things to happen, 8 beats after something else happened, and so on. So having PowerShell wait and to follow the music is what it can do. And actually, I forgot to take my Lego robot with me today. But I did actually have an extension for it that makes the Lego robot dance to the clock. So every time there's a clock, every time we calculate a beat, it goes like zzz, zzz, zzz. But maybe I can do that in the Lego session tomorrow. So a little teaser for that. Okay, so this is how MIDI works. This is how all synthesizers and electronic music instruments and whatever works. There's 24 clicks per beat. So, demo, keeping up with the tempo. First of all, this module didn't support clock messages. It supports events such as somebody clicked a note, there's a change in the MIDI CC, all the stuff that I talked about a sec ago. It supported that, but it didn't support clock. But luckily it's on GitHub, so this is the extension I did. I went into C# and I made this little piece here, and you don't have to understand it, but it's just sending the event. Whenever there's a MIDI message called, where is it? It's a little bit down here. Right here you see, whenever there's a message of the type timing clock, it sends a MIDI timing clock message. All right, great. So let's look at PowerShell. Let's just register the event here. So first of all, I can then get all the ports that I need. I have 2 inputs, 2 outputs. So the outputs will be used to control a tractor, and the inputs will be used to receive messages from tractor. So this means that I can go and make an event. I can make PowerShell code that will trigger using this. I'll get back to the rest of it, but using this command called register object event, I can take one of the ports, like input port A, and I can say, when you receive MIDI clock message received, when that events happen, you should trigger a specific code. It's in the end here. You see? Action. Action, when it happens, run the code, the script block called action clock. Great. The script block that is going to execute is this, the action clock. And what it does, as you see, it says, okay, 1 beat, I call it 1 beat, it's a quarter note, is 24 of those clocks. So every time you hit, it has a global variable. I know that's breaking PowerShell rules, but it's actually required in this exact situation. But you can then compare what is the actual number we are at now versus the 24. And if it's 0, it means you have reached 24 clocks. So we can go in and say, okay, we have 1 beat. So we count 1 up in the beat counter. And here is the actual code for the Lego robot. See? Robot enable equals true, then you should invoke the command called invoke EV3 turn. Right. And if it's an equal number, and when it's an odd number, you invoke the left, and it just goes like kind of like the people dancing at a DJ set. Anyway, but we can also go and say, okay, number of beats 4 for 1 bar, as I said, and we can then calculate exactly the tempo. For this, I needed somewhere to put the values. I needed somewhere to put a value in and take it out quickly. So instead of using a normal variable and making some code to check whatever was there and so on, I used something called the system collections queue from .NET, which has 20 slots in my case here. So this means for every beat, I can insert one thing into the MIDI queue, and I can use that to, you see here is this, in queue, whatever timestamp it is, when does this beat happen. So it will, and when I in queue something, it's gonna push it into the queue, and then it's gonna delete the oldest one. So I can then use that array to actually calculate what is the average tempo from the last 20 beats. And then I can use that, and I can go here and write that to the output if I want to. So if I trigger this, inside Tractor, there's this button called sync here, play. If I have sync enabled, Tractor will send out tempo and whatever else happens. Let's try that. So nothing happens now. Well, it does because I did enable, but if it's disabled, you see nothing happens. But if I start the sync here, it sends out the clock, which means it can now calculate what the tempo is. And as you can see on the numbers, MIDI is the most stable protocol in the whole world. But again, nobody will notice if you have, like, you see how many decimals there are? Nobody's gonna notice that. If I change the tempo here, you'll see that it's gonna go up. So now I can actually schedule stuff, I can make stuff happen in the sync of the music. Good, so far so good. And let's just continue here. All right. Yes, so my extension there. So as I said, we can queue actions happening. Let's just checking the time there. Okay, so queue actions. I mean, you're standing as a DJ, you need to mix a new track, so you think in your head, okay, it's gonna happen at this point, I'm gonna click that button, I'm gonna turn that knob, I'm gonna do all these different things that a DJ actually does. Right, so this is the MIDI clock. So here is the next version I did, which was, I have the queue, as I said. It's an array list, actually. I can then queue an action. I can put in an action and say, okay, I want this action to happen. Let's just see if I, for example, here, queue action, beat countdown 4, which means after I run this command, after 4 beats, it's gonna run the code that's in the script block. Great, so now I thought, yes, I have it sorted, everything is great. But you then need to schedule the action at the exact right time, so what's the difference? It was not perfect, so I had to do some more, of course. It's always, when you do some automation, you think it's gonna be easy. And then you find that might be easy, but you can do 1,000 more things than you imagined in the beginning, so it takes a long time, sometimes. But the thing is, what I want is to have something happen exact number of beats after a certain point in the track. So when you hit a specific point in the track, let's load a track here. You see these markers here? Okay, so at this point, from that point, I want to schedule things to happen. So I can make the track go, and when it hits that point, I want things to happen in PowerShell. So going back to the extension here, actually it's not there, but there is some different events here. Let me just show it in the module here. There you go. I have this module called PSDJ, best name I could find for it. But the thing is, yep. Thank you. Let's see. There it is. Okay. So as I said, we can register these events like when a note is pressed, when you press a button on a key on the keyboard. And actually inside Tractor, I can go in and say, okay, this is a marker, right? And if we go and show the extended, and I can't zoom in, sorry. I can set it to what's called fade out. So this is a fade out marker. And I can go into Tractor and say, okay, when you hit a fade out marker, you should send a specific note. Whoops, I just destroyed it. Not a good idea. Let's see if it didn't remember, so good. So it says, if you hit one of these markers, you should press a note on the keyboard, like if somebody would do that. So I can make an event in PowerShell that acts on that. Say, okay, if you receive a note on message received, A or B from one of the two inputs, if the note is number 26, you should invoke the command called invoke fade out reached. As you see here, D1 is number 26. It's not really obvious, but I had to test that, to figure out what number it is, because it starts, as I said, number 0 is C-1, the lowest note, and then it goes up from there. So when it hits one of these markers, it's going to send this note, which means this code is going to act, which executes this command, this commandlet. And all it does is to say fade out reached equals true. Another global variable. Super best practices here. This means I can now schedule things, which is super great. See? So I can see, for example, invoke queue action. Wait for fade out equals true. How many beats after the fade out do I want this to happen? And what do I need? What do I want to have to happen when that point is? So I can, for example, 16 beats after the marker, I can start the next song. 22 beats after the marker, I can then do some mixing. And then 64 beats, I can then turn down the song that was playing previously. And then at 80, I can then turn off the actual track that was playing before. So far, so good. Yeah. Let's see here. I'll just unregister the event. There you go. So if I run this code, it's going to register these two events, fade out reached, and also what we had before. But look at this. Now it doesn't only calculate the BPM as I did before. What it also does is for every single of these 24 clocks, it's going to go in and see if the fade out is reached. Okay? If that is true, well, it's going to set the fade out reach to false because it has handled it. And then it's going to mark all the actions that was waiting for the fade out to be false. And then comes the next code. It says, okay, is there any actions that I need to do? Okay, so it looks into the queue of actions and it executes the script block that I sent in to that certain time. So it looks at the action and says, if you look at one of the action objects, right there, let's see, here, queue action. One of the action objects, it has wait for fade out, true, false, beat countdown, how many beats until it starts, and then the script block, as I said. But for each of these beats, it's gonna count. If it has 8, then on the next beat, it's gonna count down 1 to 7, to 6, to 5, to 4, to 3, to 1, and when it hits 0, it's going to execute the code. So you see here, if the beat countdown, first thing it does is to minus the beat countdown, and then it executes the code if it's 0, which is the next line here. Okay, great. So that now I got it figured. Now it works. It didn't. Because it turns out that it started to become more difficult. Because I don't know if you know it, but Q next mix, when, from a certain point, that's fine. But it turns out that most people have 2 hands. So a DJ actually does multiple things at once. It's also known as parallel processing, right? And you would imagine that they actually do things in sync, unless they're too drunk, of course. And then CPU threads do not. So our body can multitask. A little disclaimer, if you watch interviews of DJs at parties, they can sound like they don't have more than 1 thread. But they actually can do multiple things and multitask better than a CPU. Yeah, that was what I was testing. So I needed to do something. And let me just show you. So how would you do background background jobs? Yeah, using background jobs. How would you parallel? You can do background jobs, a new job. You can use run spaces. There's a thing called push RS job, which is an easy way to make background jobs using run spaces, which is, as far as I know, the quickest, best way to do multi-thread in PowerShell or .NET. Okay, so the first version I did, I used normal background jobs. They are super slow. They are not made for the actual DJing, of course. So let's see. This is a function called volume fade, and you'll see later I did rename it to a little bit better name in the module. But what it does, you send an output port, a start value, end value, and then how many milliseconds there should be between each step. So what we want to happen is simply, let me show the mixer again. There you go. This, right? This is what we want to happen. So we send the start and the end and how long it should run. So it sends this, and I know I was using a pipe here that could be optimized a bit, but I quickly discovered that this was not the way to go. So let's try it. Let's see. I'll trigger all this code here. See, I have a break here, so it just registered everything like that. I can clear the queue, and let's have some music. So we'll stop output port B, and we'll start Number A, nothing happens. Why doesn't it happen? It's so weird. Okay. I might need to reboot actually. Something like that. But what you'll see here is when I cue an action, let me just shut down everything else here. And this also. I tested it right before I started, right? But then you come into the blue room. The curse of the blue room. Now we got it running. We have the MIDI ports. It's triggered. You could hear, you saw the beat coming in. So why does nothing come out? We'll see. Okay, it's working now. Now I just have to load a track before I can actually play a track. Pretty obvious. Straight. There we go. Music. Okay. So I want both of the volume faders to go up at the same time. So I schedule an action here. 4 beats after I run it, it should do a volume fade for port A and a volume fade for port B. You'll see in the you see here that it's gonna count down 4, 3, 2, 1 for each beat, and then when it's 0, it's gonna run the action. But notice the volume faders here. They don't do it at the same time, you see, and it's worse sometimes and it's less worse sometimes. It's not a really good DJ. So, yeah, that's the kind of thing. Okay, maybe I can do some better parallel processing, whatever, but it seemed too hard. So I just turned it all around and said, okay, first of all, let's shut the music here. I turned it all around and I said, okay, what do I need to happen? How can I make things happen at the same time? Always. Well, this is actually this demo here. Let me just see. Okay, here you go. Yeah. So I want things to happen at the same time. I want, for example, to do a volume fade like I just showed. I want to maybe bass fade, which means like removing the bass from the new track, and then this one is running, and then we turns up this while we turn down that one at the same time, and that's how you mix music. So it's about four or five things happening at the same time sometimes, because I also want to do the same with the mid here of the EQ. So turning that a normal and starting low, and then when I turn this down, I want to turn that up, and at the same time, I want to turn the volume up. So a lot of things happening at the same time. So I thought, how can I actually make that happen at the same time without doing parallel processing at all? So this is now using my module, which is available on GitHub, except I haven't pressed the sync yet, so there's no code in GitHub, but the repo is there. So what I do is, for every single of these, let's see here, for every single of those 24 clocks that we had for each beat, I go in and I see, is there an action running? And I calculate how much do I need to tweak this button for each of these 24. So if I want to do a 0 to 127 fade in 8 beats, I can calculate how much increment per clock I need to do to make it happen. So if we look at the code for a fade, it says what controller do I want to fade, what controller do I want to hit, how long do I want it to run, you see, how many beats, like 8, I can times that with, multiply that with 24, so now I have how many clocks this fade should go. And by doing simple math, I can say, okay, I want to end equal minus start. That means how many steps am I going? and I can divide that with the duration, and it gives me the number for how much it should tweak the button every single clock. So it has the list of actions that are running, it has a list of actions that are waiting, and the running actions will then be handled by the code here that says, okay, if the action type is a CC, which means one of those that tweaks the button, or fader, you can go in and say, okay, start, and increment, and the clock, how long has it been running, how much should it increment, so what should the value now be, and then set that value. So this way, it doesn't do any parallel jobs. It just tweaks everything a little bit for every single of those 24. But you can imagine how PowerShell is pretty busy doing this. Because it's 24 events per beat, so it's really, really a lot. So that's also why when Thorsten said, you can just record with Camtasia, I said, nope. Because if my computer is loaded by something else, it's not going to keep the tempo. So this thing is not perfect. I wouldn't recommend to get a DJ job and then just rely on my module. They'd probably be pretty angry in Las Vegas or wherever you played for like 100,000 people and goes, oh, PowerShell crashed. Oh, damn. I mean, I have experience myself to play at a few hundred people, and multiple times our computer has actually not crashed ever. It's a MacBook, by the way, running Mac OS, and it's been running since 2011, and it has never crashed, except if I were to do something. There was one time where the actual power supply was pulled out by somebody, and we didn't notice that, and we didn't notice the battery was going down, and then we were like dancing, yeah, and then it just shut off, and it's like, what the fuck? And people were like, yeah. Another time couldn't get it running, but it turns out I tried to put the FireWire cable into the Ethernet port. That took 15 minutes and 200 people waiting. It was one of my friend's birthdays, so that was a free gig. And what do you get paid for when you do free gigs? Free bar. And we played at 5 a.m., so you can imagine. It was difficult to find the right cables. So I made a module for this. So all these MIDI functions, I can map to all these things inside TrackShow. What I need to do is I need to be able to start, I need to be able to control these, I need to be able to select the next track down here, I need to be able to load a track, like that. I need to start the track, and when you start a track, you need to set a master like this, and then when you start the other track, you need to sync it like this, and now they are in sync, and then this might go away, and you can then mix. So I need a lot of functions, and this is what my module does. It uses Pete Brown's MIDI module to send the messages, but it has all these things that works with TrackShow. And then this controller set up here, I've exported this as a file, so you can import the actual controller. And I have two of them, one for port 1 and one for port 2. And all the actions I need is then mapped to different nodes or different CCs, depending if it's a button or if it's a fader or whatever. So let's put this out here. So for example, I can, let's just load another track so you can see that something actually happens. And then I hate this renames thing. So let's just load that same track here. So if I do invoke load, it'll load the actual selected track down here, and I send the port, like port A, and it loads the track. I can then reset, for example, if this was like, this, it wouldn't sound very good, so I reset, have a command to reset the deck mix on output A, which you saw there. Yep. I need to also reset the tempo. At least in this case, I wanted to play in its normal tempo. The good thing about TrackShow is, as I said, it has a sync button, so it can check if it's out of sync. Yeah. But it also it knows the tempo of the track, so it scans the tracks and finds the tempo. So that's why it can do all these things in sync. So I can reset the tempo. I can start deck A, like that, right? I can also set the deck A to master when it's already mastered. Let's put the master on the other one. I can't actually because it's not playing, but I set A to master. Then number B needs to be loaded. So before I hit this marker here, I need to schedule what happens to the mix, right? Let's turn up the volume a little bit. Not too much. So I need to select the next track. I need to load the next track. But that was actually too loud. What I also need to do is go to the first cue, which means going to this marker here. It's number 2 here. Oh, that's not intentionally. So I need to have it like scheduled to go there. So what I do is I select the next track in the list using the select next track command. I load the track to number B, select the first cue, which is the marker 1 here. There it goes, so now it's ready. I enable sync, which is this, so it syncs with the other one. Then I want to set the volume to maximum or 0, depending on the track and mix, of course. I want to set the bass to something, so I start with no bass. I start with a little off the mid-side, so this now can play on top of each other without sounding like pure crap. It only sounds a little crappy. I can clear the cue, so I'm sure that there's no actions. And now comes the fun part here. I just go back a little in the track here. Now I can actually schedule the things, as I said, 16 beats after the fade out. Actually, I'm just gonna run this, so we schedule it. So, as you can see, we have the events happening, so it runs all these events when it gets the tempo. And I can schedule, you see, 16 beats after the fade out. And what you'll see is that when we hit the fade out, you'll see a verbose saying, then it's because this goes like that. Yeah, you see when it hits that, you'll see a fade out reached message here, and you'll see it's gonna count down for each of the scheduled actions. So I've scheduled, you see here, 16 beats after it should start the next track. It starts there, right? So now we have 2 tracks. And then on next here on 32, we're gonna do the bass, the equalizer fade stuff, which is the mid. As you can see here, it does these things at the same time. And then a new track coming on, and then it's done with that. So a little later, it's gonna turn down the volume of the old track, a previous track, like that. And then when it's done with that, it's gonna stop the old track. So here you go. That's an automated mix. All right. So I'm not done yet, though. Maybe I should turn the music off, actually. Yeah, I know. I only have a little bit. This is my DJ module. I'll be sure to post it on GitHub right after this. So how to get started, right? You buy cool sunglasses and music. You should buy the music. You download my module. You run the invoke mix command. So what I just showed, this was kind of a standard mix. So I made a command that has all that in it. So you just invoke mix, one track to the other, and you can, if you want, select how far, how many beats should be between these things. And then step 4, have a successful life. Right? So the last thing I want to show is a little extra thing here. So let's look at that. So we have the track. Here you go. Let me load this little thing here, down here. See, I hit that.
Well, I actually invented PowerShell, so from the very beginning.
You know the actual voice, it's Mr. Snower. And we have another one here. He actually sounds a little bit worse.
My name is Joey.
So 2 samples, right? So we want that to happen too. So first of all, I need to be in the right spot here, right? So we go, deck A prep, we load the track and all the stuff I just explained about the other one. So we go like this. And now we have the music running. Oh, it jumps around a bit. And then we have the invoke mix command. And I can say how many things before it starts and so on. Okay, and then I can run that, but before it actually hits the fade out, I can actually run this command down here.
Well, I actually invented PowerShell, so from the very beginning.
Pretty good. So let's try that. You make the invoke mix. It's gonna schedule all the stuff that I did before. Not gonna explain that again. It's gonna load. It's gonna do whatever it needs to do. And if we come to the point of the actual marker, you see the same things happening as before. But you see that the counts here are much higher than before because it's a much longer mix between those tracks. And what you'll also see in the queue here, I've queued even in the end. I've queued the sample to happen, right? So Jeffrey should come in right before the drop, and then the party going on, right? And let's see if that works. Just have a Coke meanwhile. And again, notice the so notice again it counts down in 2 tracks. They are synced. Of course, it's not perfect mix or perfect speakers either, but it still counts down, you see, for each beat, for each of those. And now I can just, dance and do whatever. There's my drink here. There's no whiskey in it though. And then it's gonna mix for me. And of course, you could, as the last action, you could cue the next mix. So you could have one mix when it's done, in cue the next mix, and then have the next mix and so on. And I could automate a whole hour if I wanted to. I have actually promised another conference that if this goes well, I'm gonna try to make an actual DJ set at the party, at Fendi party, using this. But that's a little bit scary. See? Mixes.
Well, I actually invented PowerShell, so from the very beginning.
And it goes like, and then the party's on again, right? And then we can maybe do an extra little thing here.
My name is Joey.
And if we want, we could do stuff like putting this on, so it will be like...
My name is Joey.
Maybe even this one and this one, so it will be...
My name is Joey.
On clear, right?
My name is Joey.
So the invoke deck sample just sends again MIDI messages controlling the samples. And that's actually it. So, actually, I didn't have time to play some of these tracks, but these were the tracks I planned to play. The first 2 was the first 2 I did all the explanations on, and then the last mix you heard was these 2 down here, and it's all from Polka Records. And as you can see, you could buy them on Beatport or at their own Bandcamp page, and I'll upload the slides afterwards. So, summary. DJing is actually not that super easy to do. I mean, it's not rocket science when you do it by hand, but there's a lot of things happen. TrackShow rules. It's super great program for playing a DJ set, and MIDI was cool even before it was cool. It was been cool since 1983, and now people think it's an old crappy protocol, but the industry hasn't really decided on a new protocol yet. It's actually one coming next year, so. Yep. And parallel threads are the pain in the record player. Yep, and that's actually what I have for today. And is there any questions in the last 5 minutes? Yeah?
How many hours?
So the question is, how many hours? Yeah, well, as I said, I planned this, 1.5 years ago. And since I got a daughter that is 1.5 years old now, so the hours has really, the priorities has changed, right?
Have you seen your daughter in the TrackShow?
Yes. But it is a problem when you sit and do this stuff and it becomes 4 a.m. and then she wakes up at 5:30. So my wife there's been a few times where she thought I went to bed too late, but it hasn't actually taken that many hours. I mean, I don't know, let's say 50 maybe, something like that. I've actually used this in when I did, flights to America. You sit there for 8 hours and could tip code or script, whatever, in the plane. It goes like, whoa, I'm in Seattle. Okay, great. 8 hours later, right? So yeah, I don't know. Any other questions? Who's gonna use this tomorrow? Yeah?
One more question. Would it be possible to transfer this to another back-end solution, something else than TrackShow? Because it's standard MIDI, but I assume the signals are totally different.
Yeah. Yeah, so the only thing that's TrackShow specific at all is mappings here between, I send one message and something happens. But as Walter down there actually said, he's doing VJ mixing, which means mixing, video for music. And first of all, it doesn't have to be completely in sync when it's video. That's a good thing. And we can actually use this to do that. So yeah, you can control any MIDI solution. But my DJ module is for this, but you can use Pete Brown's module for any kind of communication. Yeah, another question? Program changes? What do you mean? Yeah, like if you have a synthesizer, you send a program change to change the preset. So yeah, so a synthesizer has different, sounds or different presets, different settings, and yes, it can do that. It can do program changes. Yeah.
Can you also drive the synthesizer?
Drive the synthesizer?
With more than one voice at a time?
Yeah, that's a good question. If you want to send multiple notes at the same time.
Should be possible, but it works sometimes the way it's a serial protocol. You just have to send notes in a row.
Yeah.
So we send all notes with volume 0, then adjust volume.
What you do in MIDI is you send, to make a note in MIDI, you send a note on and a note off later. So to make a melody, you would send note on, note off, and then next note. But if you send 3 notes, note on, you'll have all the 3 playing at the same time. And then you send 3 note offs later to stop them again. And of course, they will not be technically playing at the exact same time, but it's going to be milliseconds. And I know I can hear about 10 milliseconds when I play music if it's too slow, but yeah, it won't be more than, a millisecond maybe. But again, if you look at Pete Brown here, his module, for example, my fork of it, it's called Windows 10 PowerShell MIDI. Great name. What's it not for? There's an whole section about this is not meant to be a high-performance MIDI scripting library. This is the nature of PowerShell is a lot of async stuff, and it's not meant to, play music. So, and it's similarly, if this was to send the tempo, in my case, TrackShow was sending the tempo, the clock. But if PowerShell would send the tempo, well, it wouldn't be the best tempo. I mean, it would not be stable. So but it's again, as Walter said, it was great to have, for example, for video mixing. Yeah. Any other questions? Thank you for coming then.